California headline news. A wild car chase through several cities in Los Angeles County came to an end in Pasadena when the fleeing driver struck an SUV. The suspect blew through multiple intersections at a high rate of speed, drove on the wrong side of the road a few times, and even drove on a sidewalk. A 14-year-old girl was killed, her 12-year-old sister injured after they were struck by a big rig truck this morning while crossing a street in Los Angeles. A friend of the girls saw it happen.
She ran to render aid, call 911. She actually grabbed her friend's hand and said, hang in there. You're going to be okay.
The friend told police the driver had his head down at the time of the accident. And a Los Angeles police SWAT team raided the house of a music producer.
At two different large homes here in L.A., animals were seized. At the home of hip-hop producer Molly Mall, an African cat called a serval was allegedly living in the house and has now been taken. And at another home, a spider monkey was seized.
That's reporter Alex Stone. Steve Clausen, California News.
Orangutans. They're beautiful, playful, and majestic. And disappearing. Every day, as many as 20 orangutans vanish. They starve to death when their homes are destroyed or are killed when they stray into villages in search of food. International Animal Rescue is fighting for the survival of the critically endangered orangutan. But we can't do it without you. Please visit internationalanimalrescue.org and help us save orangutans before it's too late. That's internationalanimalrescue.org.
I'm John Simmons, Manager of Agriculture for Tabasco Brand Pepper Sauce. My family's made Tabasco sauce for 150 years. What am I working for? I'm working to stay true to our family recipe.
At ADP, we're designing a better way to work so you can achieve what you're working for. HR, talent, time, benefits, and payroll. Informed by data and designed for people. Learn more at design.adp.com. ADP, always designing for people.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. A man is in custody in connection with a quadruple homicide in Mandan, North Dakota. Police announced the arrest of Chad Isaac of Washburn in the case tonight. He's suspected of being behind the deaths of 4 people whose bodies were found at RJR Maintenance and Management on Monday. Police say the person who claimed he was a missing boy from Illinois is actually a 23-year-old man from Ohio. Brian Michael Reaney told police in Kentucky that he was Timothy Pitson, who went missing when he was 6 years old in 2011. DNA tests proved that Reaney was faking the whole thing. President Trump is backing away from his threat to shut down the border with Mexico. Speaking with reporters, Trump celebrated efforts by Mexico to stop the flow of illegal immigrants into the U.S. Earlier, he said he was giving Mexico a 1-year warning to curb illegal immigration into the U.S. Boeing is promising to carefully review the report from Ethiopia's Accident Investigation Bureau and take all steps necessary to ensure safety of its aircraft.
In a statement released Thursday, Boeing CEO Kevin McAllister said the company is planning to release an update to the anti-stalling software MCAS and comprehensive pilot training for the 737 MAX models. The first official report on the deadly Ethiopian Airlines crash says pilots repeatedly followed procedures recommended by Boeing. Tom Roberts, NBC News Radio.
A search is on in Uganda for a kidnapped American tourist and her local driver. Whoever kidnapped 35-year-old Kimberly Sue and her driver Jean Paul are demanding $500,000 for their release. University of Colorado professor Joel Harder describes what's happening in Uganda as authorities search for the assailants.
Wildlife rangers right now, they're trying to track them down. They are trying to find this person in an area the size of Rhode Island. There are wild animals around.
The pair were ambushed while on a safari in Queen Elizabeth National Park this week. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-298-8662. That's 800-298-8662. 800-298-8662. 8662.
KCAA. Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reid. By the way, you can follow the show both on Facebook and Instagram at Viewpoint with Father John. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing a false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And brothers and sisters, Viewpoint with Father John is a listener-supported show. You are the ones who keep us on the air each week, so please go to viewpointwithfatherjohn.com, click on the support button, and give what you can. I truly thank you for your support, and those of you who've been giving, thank you. You've been keeping us on the air, and I'm grateful. Also, I'd like to invite you to buy a copy of my book, Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me. The premise of this book is that we are all God's children, and that we do not need more self-improvement, rather we need self-discovery. Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and most online bookstores. So get your copy today, and that also helps support this show. Tonight, my guest is David Zailer, author of When Lost Men Come Home, A Journey to Sexual Integrity, Starting Point for Recovery, a simple 12-step guide to use for counseling for addiction recovery, and Our Journey Home, Insights and Inspiration for Christian 12-Step Recovery. And so, David, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Great. I'm going to have you talk just a little closer to the phone because I'm getting you kind of low on this end of it. How are you this evening?
You know, I'm doing well. It's been a long day, but I've been looking forward to our chat this evening, and so I'm grateful to be here.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad to have you on here. And addiction is quite a subject to talk about. A lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about it.
Sure.
And so as we dive into this tonight, or delve into it if you prefer proper English, hopefully we can give some information to people that recovery from addiction is more than just not using alcohol or drugs or other substances, but it's a change of life, from my understanding. Would that go along with your writings?
Absolutely. I think that most people confuse recovery with stopping.
Right.
And I believe that recovery is not really about stopping; it's about not starting.
Okay.
And unless we change our life going forward, then we're probably going to start once again, whatever it might be. And this is actually, I think, the great revolution that Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step programs brought to the horror and the enslavement of addiction is the understanding that this is not something that we have to beat. It's something we learn to live without.
Right.
And so it's really working to develop a life going forward where the addictive behavior, whatever it might have been, the alcohol, the drugs, the sex, or whatever, that those things don't make sense to us anymore.
Right.
It's just not what we want to do.
Well, yeah, and most of the 12-step communities, from my understanding, see the substance as simply a symptom of stuff that's really going on deep inside. And, you know, from a religious point of view, we look at it as a spiritual issue along with a physical and psychological issue. And so in my way of thinking, it has to be a three-pronged approach. I remember years ago, a friend of mine, Chuck Brissett, had written a directed a film called The Three-Headed Dragon, and it talked about the three heads of addiction, and that if you don't cut off all three heads, it just grows new heads and keeps attacking. Would you concur with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that that addiction is certainly a fully human struggle.
Yes.
When people are addicted, especially in the area of chemicals, they're addicted in their body, and especially as we understand the neuroscience, we understand that addiction is very much a disorder of the neurochemistry and really a brain problem.
Right.
But it's also a relationship problem, and it's a connection problem. I think that I don't think that people quite understand the magnitude of isolation that addicted people are struggling with and suffering from, and whereas addiction is all about fracturing relationships, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with other people, our relationship with our God, whereas recovery is a movement to coming back into connection. It's a movement back towards intimacy, an intimacy with ourselves, an intimacy with other people where we're having authentic, sincere interactions with others, and also an intimacy with the God who made us.
Right. Well, let's go back and talk a little bit about the isolation, if you would.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people who have not struggled with this really have an understanding. They say, well, isolated, what do you mean? They sit in a room. And with people I've worked with, I have a counseling practice. I've done special ministries for many years, is that they can be in a room full of people and be totally isolated. And
sure.
That they feel like they're left out. So could you speak on that for a minute?
Well, let me go back even further than that. I think most of us, if we take a moment to be honest with ourselves, we can relate with the statement of being lonely in a room of 100 people, and being in a crowded room and feeling all alone. It's not a matter of physical presence. It's a matter of internal connection. And having that sense that I can be known, and I know other people. I believe that the great setups for addiction have to do with trauma and family history.
Okay.
And both trauma and family history produce great shame and a great wounding deep in one's soul. And I think really the characteristic result of shame is the sense that no one would like me, or no one would care for me, or no one would accept me if they really knew who I was, if they really knew what was going on. And so often the result of addiction is that one of the contributors to addiction and one of the results of addiction is secret keeping.
Right. The don't trust, don't talk, don't feel. Yeah.
Childhood experience and trauma leads to secret keeping, and so people grow up really being very selective about what they let people around them see.
Right.
And so that's really, I believe, the basis of that sense of isolation. And then here's the tragic byproduct of it.
Okay.
Is out of my sense of isolation, I began to find some sort of solution. The alcohol or the drugs or the promiscuity, the pornography. And these things are things, unattractive things that I'm doing that I certainly don't want the world to know about because they incriminate my reputation and they incriminate my character. And so now I'm living a life where I'm continuing to live out and even replicate the sense of isolation that was imposed upon me. And that is the social relational dynamic of addiction, I believe.
Okay.
It's based in shame. It's reinforced through the sense of fear and isolation. It's reinforced through behavior, and it eats away at the human soul, and it's highly destructive.
Yes. And my experience has been it also becomes really a death spiral of a progression. It's as people go into the tailspin, they do things that they hate, and then they hate themselves for doing it, so they have to do more stuff to take their mind off of what they've done, and it's just a never-ending cycle that really leads deeper and deeper and deeper. Has that been your experience as well?
Well, sure. Without intervention and without help, addiction doesn't get any better.
Right.
One of the symptoms of addiction is, and really kind of the core building block of addiction as well, is denial. In the unfortunate insanity of addiction and the distorted thinking, the addicted person generally doesn't see the downward cycle.
Right.
Or they'll say, or the alcoholic will say, "Hey, I'm not drinking any more today than I was a month ago or 6 months ago," and that might be true.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the destructiveness is perhaps in more subtle ways. The marriage and the relationships continue to deteriorate.
Right.
The person's health continues to deteriorate, and because of the dependence aspect of addiction, in the areas of our addictions, we become masters of finding ways to avoid or seeing how our addictions are hurting us.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we're not being hurt.
Sure.
And so this is where people have to have help, and they have to, in order to, they're going to need some help in seeing these consequences.
Well, sure. And sometimes the people who need just as much help is the family of these individuals. Can't tell you how many times I've been at the side of a hospital bed administering what we used to call last rites, is now the anointing of the sick, with someone with a liver that's, their abdomen so distended that they get into the room 5 minutes before the rest of their body does. And then the family will say, yeah, but he's not an alcoholic, he just drinks a little too much. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. So I've seen that there has to be a lot of education of the family as well. Otherwise, they can be part of the process of missing recovery.
Sure. Well, I don't believe there's anything such as an addicted individual.
Mm-hmm.
We have addicted families where the fingers get pointed at one most obvious individual within the family.
Right.
And it's I think one of it's so common for families to want to kind of point the finger at the most obvious person with the most obvious addictions, and then that's the scapegoat.
Right.
And as long as we can keep, all the attention on getting that one person to straighten up, then the rest of the family as individuals and the family system doesn't have to change.
Right.
People don't like change.
True.
So it's this is where people will tend to point the finger and, I just wish I could get my wife to stop drinking. Or I just wish my husband would stop drinking or quit looking at porn. And the assertion is that if you can get my loved one to straighten up and fly right, me and everybody else in the whole world can be happy.
Right.
And this is where I really believe that the family support programs, the Al-Anon program, the CODA programs, they're essential. They're absolutely essential.
I would agree. Well, speaking of straightening up and flying right, we're at our first commercial break.
Okay.
And if I don't go to commercial, then I'm going to get the finger from Nick. And so
okay.
My guest tonight is David Zailer, and we'll be back in 2 and 2.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
Hey guys, this is Andrew Caravella. Just wanted to let you know that KCAA has a new listener line for all of you that have a phone. Now you can listen to KCAA in the grocery store, in the doctor's office, or when you want to pretend you're on the phone with someone just so that creeper will leave you alone. Call 720-835-3099 today and listen to your favorite KCAA radio shows. That number again, 720-835-3099. KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no caller or listener behind.
If you're looking for a full or part-time sales position and you have radio, TV, or print media experience, KCAA has a great opportunity waiting for you that pays the highest commissions in the market. KCAA is the only station in the IE that broadcasts on 3 frequencies, so advertisers receive 3 ads for 1 low rate. This makes KCAA a must-buy for every local business. If you're interested in a sales position with us, email CEO@kcaaradio.com.
And welcome back. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reid. And again, I remind you that you can follow us on both Facebook and Instagram. Just go to Viewpoint with Father John on either of those media platforms. Hey, I learned a new sentence this week, media platform. And tonight, my guest is David Zailer. He's the author of When Lost Men Come Home, A Journey to Sexual Integrity, also Starting Point for Recovery, a simple 12-step guide for use and counseling for addiction recovery, and Our Journey Home, Insights and Inspirations for Christian 12-Step Recovery. And if I may, I want to ask you a little bit, what kind of got you to write these books? Because these are very fascinating titles, and they seem like really in-depth writings.
Well, thank you. The first book, which is When Lost Men Come Home, Not for Men Only, that's the sexual integrity book. I kind of started writing it before I knew what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I learn a little bit every day as I continue to write that I still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm learning as I go. Back in 2002, my sponsor from Alcoholics Anonymous, Bob, and he had this great meeting at his church that I attended. And one day he says to me, he said, we need to start a group, a 12-step group to help men with porn addiction. Okay. And you're going to run it. And I looked at him and I said, No, I don't think I want to do that. But he kept at it and would not let me off the hook, and he was my sponsor. And so after about a few months of going back and forth, myself and two other men, we met together and kind of looked at each other and said, what are we going to do? And I was the only one with any kind of recovery experience. I was a few years sober at the time. Pornography. I had grown up as a child looking at my father's pornography, so I think in many ways it was my first addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But we just kept meeting, and I brought in 12-step material of various sorts for discussion. We had great discussions. The group grew, and within a year or so, we had like 25 guys. And I would sit in the room listening to these amazing people sharing these amazing discoveries about themselves, about God's love, what they were discovering and learning in recovery, how they were really blossoming in freedom and in growth as a result of just putting, just these little stepping stones that we call the 12 steps.
Okay.
And what I would do is I would go home and I would write down what these people said. And then I would write it the best that I could, and I would bring it back into the rooms, and we would read through it, and the guys really liked it, and it just kept building. And over several years, I just was putting this material together. And then we had a man come to our fellowship who knew how to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me some guidance and some instructions, and I just kept at it. And it took several years, but that's how we developed the first book. Since then, I've written, as you know, I've written several other books, and I've just continued to kind of be an old plow horse when it comes to creating this content.
Now, you mentioned you were dealing with people who were addicted to pornography. Now, is there a specific group that people can be referred to for this addiction?
Oh, there's lots of great resources. I'll give you some here.
Okay.
In the Christian fellowships, the Celebrate Recovery world doesn't have their main thrust is not about a pornography addiction, but within the Celebrate Recovery world, there's a huge number of men and women who are dealing successfully with pornography through the Celebrate Recovery 12-step group. So there's a great resource there. Mm-hmm. People can reach out to us at Operation Integrity through our website at operationintegrity.org. We have some resources listed on our website. There are mainstream 12-step programs like Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. These are three excellent programs with meetings in just about any medium to large metro-sized area. So you can just Google them online, and you'll get all kinds of opportunities to connect with people for support.
Now, does everybody who watches porn have addiction, or is it a certain amount of people who watch? Because it's an area that there's not a whole lot of information about out there. What have you found out about that?
Well, first of all, I think pornography is a drug.
Okay.
It is an absolute drug. When you understand, what pornography is mood and mind altering, just like any other drug.
Right, the oxytocin. Right.
Yep. Instead of drinking it or smoking it or injecting it somehow, people are taking the drug influence in through their eyes, and certainly, especially people who started looking at pornography, the younger they start looking at it, the more likely they are to have troubles and to grow up to be addicted to it.
Okay.
I think pornography is a deeply addictive material, but in our culture, I don't think we quite understand the nature of it, because we assume that it's just kind of a harmless, like a little harmless pastime. But people don't understand that the destructiveness is that it warps our perceptions of our own sexuality.
Sure.
It warps our perceptions of other people and how we're to relate with them, sexuality, and the consequence is eroded health. It brings a very toxic and unhealthy dynamic to the way people interact with one another in a romantic sense. So we're finding now that even young men in their 20s and 30s are having erectile dysfunction because they're so accustomed to being stimulated by pornography that their wives are no longer what stimulates them.
Now I've seen that happen, and I had somebody get really angry with me years ago because I was telling them that over amounts of pornography can actually cause us to desensitize and can lead to impotence. And they said, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." Now, I was a young kid studying psychology at the time, but I remember at that time there's a lot of philosophy about that. And
right.
So this is not a new problem. It's one that's been around for quite a while.
Right. Oh, it's certainly not a new problem. The heartbreak is that we're having a belief system driven by a social culture and not by facts.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the good news. Is that when people start addressing the reality of addiction in their life, when people start getting honest and coming to terms with the fact that the pornography that they're looking at is hurting them,
mm-hmm.
and that they're having a hard time stopping, or they're not being able to stay stopped,
mm-hmm.
then this is what we call addiction. And as people get help for this addiction, and as they ask for help, they're going to get help, and there's great healing ahead. People who begin the steps of recovery, getting connected in a recovering community, like one of the 12-step programs,
mm-hmm.
and developing the kinds of relationships that where they're able to speak honestly about their own problems and listen, and they become interested in starting to listen to other people do the same, they will get better. And they'll come to a point where they'll just learn that they don't want the pornography anymore. It's not like they've forgotten how compelling it is,
mm-hmm.
or how intoxicating it is, but they come to realize that they have a better life without it, and they begin to value that life, and they treasure that life, and so they don't want to go back.
Well, I want to ask you another question, and the question is going to sound like I'm being funny, and I'm not. I'm being very serious with this question. Is there a difference between sexual addiction and nymphomania? Or are they the same, two words for the same thing? Are they synonymous?
Well, there's in a very technical sense, there's probably a difference, and there could be, I'm sure, a clinical distinction between the two.
Okay.
I think at the core understanding of addiction is the word destructive.
Right.
It's not a matter of how much. It's not a matter of how often. I think we tend to think of a person who's a nymphomaniac who can't get enough of sex, that they want it all the time and they want as much as they can get. Well, if someone wants sex all the time and they want as much as they get, and if it's not hurting them, which is kind of doubtful because life is more than just about having sex,
mm-hmm.
I can't imagine a person having a healthy, balanced human experience when they're thinking or pursuing sex all the time. But even people who don't have a lot of sex can be sexually addicted.
Mm-hmm.
A number of years ago, I had a man referred to me. He was a man in his early 50s, very healthy, fit guy. He and his wife been married for I can't remember, it's 25, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, he was a religious leader in his community.
Sure, there's a lot of it in ministry.
Yep, and deeply respected, a man of great influence, and really a man of great conviction. And their marriage counselor referred him to me, and as he was talking, and he made it a point to tell me that he never looked at pornography. Well, he looked at pornography once when he was a teenager,
mm-hmm.
and he never looked at it again for moral and religious reasons.
Okay.
That he had never slept with any other woman than his wife, and that from his religious perspective, he had no out-of-bounds behavior.
Okay.
So quite an impressive guy, at least from the way he's describing this. But what he did not see is that he was so obsessive and so compulsive and so needy and so demanding in his sexual relationship with his wife that there was no intimacy there.
Mm-hmm.
There was no caring. This was not lovemaking. He went to his wife for sex really as a way of dealing with his own stress.
Right.
As though he was using his wife and their sexual relationship for his own medicating purposes.
Sure.
And the result is that his wife was worn out, tired of it all, because there was no connection of the heart, there was no consideration, there was no thoughtfulness. It was demand, demand, demand. Mm-hmm. And he was so proud to say that he didn't have any of this out of bounds immoral behavior. But the great moral failure of all of this was his narcissistic, selfish obsession that completely disregarded his wife as a person.
Right.
And I called him out and I said, "Sir, you are a sex addict."
Mm-hmm.
And he fired me because he could not come to terms with, even within the obvious behavioral boundaries that he was living, that his sexual perspectives and his sexual behaviors were destroying his relationship with his wife.
Well, yeah, and it couldn't be good for her either, because the abuse of the body, particularly if he was doing this almost on a nightly basis, the woman's body needs time to recover to be able to recuperate. Otherwise, you can do some real terrible tears, vaginal tears to a woman. So, yeah, it's just not meant to be a daily activity for most women.
Right.
So,
yeah, no, it was the result is a cold relationship within the marriage,
mm-hmm.
and it's so it ends up being a loveless marriage, and which sadly makes this man all the more compulsive and all the more obsessive, because one of the hidden casualties in any kind of sexual addiction is that it's used as a pursuit of an intimacy, but it's a counterfeit intimacy.
Right.
We for decades now we have called sex making love,
mm-hmm.
or I'm going to go home and be intimate with my wife. Well, maybe so, maybe not.
Okay.
Sex and love are not the same thing. They're made to go hand in hand, but they don't always. And when people are demanding sex without love, then that's when people start getting hurt badly.
Absolutely, I agree. Well, we need to go to our next commercial break. My guest this evening is David Zailer. Am I saying your last name correctly?
That's fine. You're saying it beautifully.
Thank you. And so we'll be back in 2 and 2.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, K292 FQ Riverside, and K293 CF Moreno Valley.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
Why are you listening to this radio station? Why? When you can host your own radio show. You're listening and you think you can do better? You have a message or a product you want everyone to know about. Host your own radio show. Team up with the area's best radio professionals and let them make you sound like you should be on NBC. KCAA NBC Radio, that is. KCAA produces more than 50 local programs each week on subjects ranging from business and sports to political talk, vegan diets, or even marijuana-related issues. We don't just broadcast on the radio, we broadcast to the world. Online, on TV, on social media, on Facebook. You'll be all over. Imagine what your friends will say. And KCAA reaches over 5 million people on 3 radio stations. Join the staff on 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM. NBC Radio. Jump on the KCAA Express. Call 909-793-1065. That's 909-793-1065 and get ready to transmit.
And welcome back, friends. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reid. And again, I want to remind you that this is a listener-supported program. Brothers and sisters, you're the one who keep us on the air each week. So if you please go to viewpointwithfatherjohn.com and press the support button and give what you can, I truly do appreciate it. I appreciate the fact you keep us on the air every week. And again, I'd like to invite you to buy a copy of my book, Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me. The premise of this book is that we are all God's children and that we don't need more self-improvement, rather we need self-discovery. And so you can get that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, most of your online bookstores. And I want to give a shout out to our sound engineer, Nick. How you doing tonight, Nick?
I'm wonderful.
Yeah. I hope you're feeling better. I know you had a tough week, not feeling good. You got some of that flu stuff going around.
Yeah, I did have a bit of a sickness during the beginning of the week. It was not a good way to start the week, but I'm good now.
I hope you sent it to some of our competing radio stations so that they'll.
I coughed into about 10 envelopes and I sent them all out.
Oh, you're a good man, Charlie Brown.
Thank you. I really didn't. So don't investigate me.
And how's your radio show going?
My radio show is it's doing well. I haven't heard any personally, but I've heard from other people around the station that I'm getting positive feedback from the listeners, so that's good.
So those of you who don't know, he is on a competing radio station on Saturdays at 4 p.m. It's a blues bar. And what is your call letters?
It is 92.5 KQLH.
So if because I'm not on at that hour, you do have my permission to switch over just for that hour, but then you come right back to KCAA, especially on Thursday nights, because we love sharing this time together with you. And also a shout out to Gabby's, who's right across the way from me. She keeps me coming here every week and looking good, and she says I'm doing great because I have the perfect face for radio. So my guest tonight is David Zailer, and I'm getting ready to sneeze. I'm sorry, folks. And we're talking about addiction and recovery therefrom. And I want to go back to something that you and I were talking about earlier, David. And you were talking about this pastor that was sent to you. And one of the problems I've seen in the religious community, and I'm not throwing rocks at anybody, it's just something I'm familiar with as a clergy person. There's some parts of the church that teach that women are rather the property of the husband, which I know where that comes from. That's from the Old Testament, where women were property, not people at that time, but we tried to change that. And so they're told if they're a good Christian wife, they're not allowed to say no to their husband whenever they want any type of sexual activity. And have you found that to be a problem with the sexual addiction?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know of anything that breeds kind of that self-centered blindness more than serious addiction, especially addictions related to sexuality. Mm-hmm. Sexuality is such a tender and important part of not just our bodies, but of who we are as people. And I think a very heartbreaking and profound problem that's gone back culturally for centuries is that somehow or another women are responsible to make men sexually happy.
Right.
And or women are at fault for tempting a man.
Right.
And so if and we tell our women that be careful of what you wear because you don't want to make it a problem for a man. You don't want to make a man lust. Well, let me tell you on your radio program for the whole world to see or to hear, excuse me, that each person and every man is responsible for what he thinks.
Yes.
And I'm not saying women shouldn't be culturally appropriate and to dress appropriately, but regardless of what a woman is wearing or not wearing, a man is responsible for what he thinks about her.
Right.
And a man is responsible for his actions.
Absolutely.
And and you know what? It goes the same way. I mean, we're culturally we are. Let's just don't assume that women don't have struggles too. Women are powerfully sexual, and it can go the other way as well. But
sure,
it is. People are responsible for what they think, and people are responsible for how they treat others. And so I think, however the religious message has been, and I think it's silly.
Yes.
For men for decades and centuries to have been teaching women how to behave.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's much more powerful, much healthier for men to be responsible for themselves and for their own actions, and to get honest about how they have put blame and responsibility on the women for their own sins.
I would agree 1,000% with that. And I'm brought to mind of a couple I worked with a while back, and he had a sexual addiction, and it was just tearing her apart. And I finally just flat out said it, that if she says no and you don't take no for an answer, that's rape. I don't care if you're married or not married. No means no. And
yeah, I have to agree with that. No, I have to fully agree with that. And look, none of us gets what we want all the time whenever we want it.
That's right.
And love is communicated not through sex, it's communicated through patience and understanding.
Sure.
And with patience and understanding, that's an environment that will ultimately lead to better sex.
Sure. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And, and some people don't know that women can also suffer from sexual addiction. When I was very young, I was just working on my bachelor's degree, and I was in a city where I didn't know a whole lot of people. And I can remember I'm walking across this parking lot. There was a Del Taco and a laundromat, and I was doing my laundry, and I went to Del Taco to get some food to bring back to the laundromat. And while I'm coming back to the laundromat, a lady pulled up in a station wagon, literally begging me to get in the car with her and have relations with her. She had never met me before. I'd never met her. She had a very strong addiction. Of course, I didn't get in the car. And I remember to this day, and I'm certainly not close to that age anymore, the desperation in her eyes that she had to have somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it just broke my heart because I realized she wasn't doing this because she wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
She was doing it because she could not do that. And that's addiction.
If sadly, and I it took me a long time to learn not to be like this and to learn. But if someone has never had an experience that felt loving outside of sex,
right,
then chasing after sex makes all the sense in the world.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And the sad thing is that it always has diminishing returns. Once again, sex outside is not directly related to love.
Right.
But you know what? It's a convenient distraction.
Sure.
It's a convenient counterfeit.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is. It's a very cheap imitation. It's emotional junk food with powerful consequences. But it's heartbreaking, and it's pretty rampant.
It really is. In fact, I do a lot of work with male spirituality, and on some of the retreats that I have the privilege of leading, one of the things I get into with the guys is what is true intimacy? What does that look like? What does love look like? And what's the difference between this and sex? Mm-hmm. And you said it very well, that when they haven't known any type of affection or love outside the bedroom, then they equate the two as being the same, and it's not, and it's never satisfying. And my experiences with what's been shared with me is when the sexual act is over, a lot of these guys feel absolutely alone, and there's no greater loneliness than laying next to someone you're supposed to be in love with and being absolutely alone.
Well, I believe that many women have never had the experience of being deeply and sincerely wanted,
mm-hmm.
except in a sexual context.
Okay.
And I believe that many men have never felt affirmed outside of a sexual context. And so, and if that's the case, then it's going to make sense to be getting as much sex as one thinks that they need, when the greatest need is the understanding that I am wanted and that I am valued and affirmed.
Mm-hmm.
interestingly enough, in recovery, we learn to be affirming to one another and to be valuing one another and wanting one another within healthy boundaries.
Yes.
And being able to live out these desires, these interactive desires, keeping our clothes on, and by making good decisions and partnering together with discipline, and so that we can build a better life going forward. You've probably heard it, but the very simple and nuts and bolts definition of intimacy is knowing and being known.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to do that physically and sexually. And so it's so easy to default to that. And in a sense, we are knowing and being known because we're knowing one another at that physical, sexual level. But at the level of the soul and the level of the emotions, and knowing one another over time, and being known over time on bad days as well as good days, that's the truer intimacy that our souls long for.
Yes. Well, in our last couple of minutes, tell our listeners a little bit about your organization. It's the Integrity Project?
Yeah, it's Operation Integrity.
Okay,
The website is operationintegrity.org. We're a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And most of our work is in the area of communications and advocacy. But if people are local, I live in Orange County, and and if people are here, I do take a few clients for counseling and program work. But most of my work is communications. I work with some treatment programs. I do some traveling. I work with. I do quite a bit of work at Mariners Church in Irvine, and I work with some other faith-based organizations. Also do some work at Coast Hills Church in Aliso Viejo.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can look us up online, operationintegrity.org.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you being on the show tonight, and you've been a great guest. And for the listeners, again, I thank you for being with us this week. And just a few things before we're in our last couple minutes here. Just some stuff coming up. You might be happy to know that Dr. Smith, myself, and Elizabeth Preston are putting together some workshops. We're going to be doing some stuff with creative journaling, both dominant hand and non-dominant hand. I'll be handling some of the spirituality, and Dr. Smith will be handling some of the emotional areas of things. And so that's some stuff coming up as we put the programs together. We'll keep you more in touch with it. And David, you want to tell some of our listeners about the different books that you have out? Our Journey Home is my favorite book of the books that I've written.
Mm-hmm. It's the subtitle is Insights and Inspirations for Christian 12-Step Recovery. That's mm-hmm. Our Journey Home. The other book is When Lost Men Come Home, Not for Men Only, A Journey to Sexual Integrity. And then I have a third book that's out called Starting Point. It's a very simple educational and informational guide, along with a 12-step guide. It's like a little starter kit. It's made to be used to help people who are in counseling. So it gives them kind of a guided process that they can be working on, and that helps them bring information to their therapist or their counselor, which will in turn help their therapist and counselor help them.
Okay.
And we've got some other books in the works, but that's the titles that are out right now.
Well, thank you very much for being on here this evening. My guest tonight has been David Zailer, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in. And if no one's told you this week that they love you, let me be the first. And you've been listening to Viewpoint with Father John, and we'll be back next week.